Very late morning Anarchapulco 2026 live streamers out there and our large audience in here who are, unfortunately, we're up against David Icke's virtual speech down in the main room, so we just didn't even stand a chance this morning. We're going down, but this is our little Subversive book club talk here. And we've got Tom Shaw here, and we've got our new ad, Sonny Davis, down here. So it's so subversive, they didn't even tell us what it's about. That's how secret this shit is. That's the only way to get into the establishment, is to make sure nobody knows what's going on, especially those in your own organization. So I guess, Tom, you're actually the host.
I am.
And Sonny, you're the only speaker we have. And as it turns out, by the way, I'm Steve Falconer from Space Busters. I'm actually a published author of subversive children's books. One of them's The Dukes of Dents, and the other one is The Goons Laser Balloons, teaching children about Agenda 21 and the control faction. So maybe after, Sonny, after we hear from you and Tom about your books, we can even run my little 7-minute video version of one of my books, yeah? If you guys want to. All right, without further ado, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Cheers, Steve. Cheers, Steve, thank you. This has worked out really well because Sonny came at the start of the conference and he showed me this book. I was like, oh, it's really cool. I want to find out more about this. And here we are as the perfect opportunity. Why did you write a book, Sonny?
Okay, yeah. Thanks for having me, everybody. This is great. Just kind of a last minute thing. And I'm like, whoa, here's an opportunity for me to share. I wrote this book because, gosh, it was kind of an inspiration from a deep ache that I think many of us kind of, maybe hold in the back of our minds. And, there's a hot debate on the face of the earth right now, and that's the cosmological debate. And I've been watching these debates for years, and whether you're not, you're familiar with these, they can be constructive, they can be very informative, but for the most part, they turn toxic. And that just comes with the territory. There is a programming that, it's sort of an ego battle. We kind of like want to present ourselves as the authority and the expert on a certain topic, no matter what it is. But, there's a protocol and an ethic and a way to do a good debate. But it seems like the art of that has been lost. And we've all but just sort of crumbled into two piles of evidence stacked high but interpreted differently. So I've come in and I'm like, you know what, this has to change. We cannot divide one another like this anymore. This has to be a unifying event and should be, because we all share the same earth. We all share the water, the air, and each other, and we got to come back together. So I'm a solutions-orientated person, right? And I wrote a book that introduces not debates, but a partnered practice called Dyads. So Dyads is not a typical conversation. Dyads is a methodological or has a method to it and a protocol that two people get together and they choose an instruction, okay? So in this case, based on the book that I wrote, and I'll tell you the name of it in a moment, we come together and we agree on an instruction. Okay, right? In a debate, you would agree on the topic, okay? And so the instruction is set. Both people in this dyad, and really, I mean, we could do one right now kind of thing, but we would be sitting face to face, almost knee to knee, okay? And I don't know if you want to. If you want to
practice it,
let's do
go
it.
on then. Let's model it. Let's model it.
Do it. Yeah.
Here we go.
Yes, it's literally like this. We literally enter a conscious agreement to give each other this instruction, and back and forth, we kind of ping pong it back and forth. So again, it's not a typical conversation. It's not just sort of like this open-ended dialogue. A dyad is a purposeful and intentional way of seeking truth without the ego and without biases or any inherited beliefs that can come in between it. So I would be partner A, Tom would be partner B, and I would give Tom the instruction. And the instruction in this case is, tell me where you are. Tell me where you are. So now I would give that. Tom would just sort of just take a moment to close his eyes and contemplate that. So now what we're going for in this practice is in terms of things like thoughts, images, feelings, and body sensations. Okay? So when I say tell me where you are, you would just take a moment to contemplate that and then express whatever comes up as the result of contemplating that instruction. And really, after about 40 minutes of going back and forth with that same instruction, we can come to a place, a state of consciousness that the Zen Buddhists call Kensho. And Kensho, whether you're familiar with that or not, is this edgeless state of no mind, no ego, no judgment, no biases. Suddenly all that stuff starts to slip away like an ice cube in warm water. It just dissolves. And so this is a practice. It's an intentional practice of drilling down on one instruction, peeling away the layers of an onion, okay? So this is what the dyad practice is about, getting to this state of Kensho. And it's possible, and it's real for everyone, and it's our right to get there. Suddenly, we become one with everything. Suddenly, we feel one with the all, with the mountainscape in the background, with the trees, the rivers, everything.
And something that really interests me about that you've put this in a book is it's a perfectly synergistic format, because reading a book, there is no ego, there is no judgment that comes online. It doesn't matter how I might react or what I might do to it. The book is just there as an observer without that. And the invitation there is for me to slow down and to really take that in however it lands with me and however I integrate it. It's a reason I have poetry books that people can have in the physical. It's to create time to step away from that noise. And when there is so much noise in the ether around us, even if it's in-person conversations or cityscapes that are busy, or the online world and everyone's ego is coming online there to drive whatever narratives or agendas there, the book for me is a really wonderful format to create that kind of environment, to slow down, to experience that sense of wholeness.
Yeah, well said, definitely. And no matter how you choose to digest literature, quickly or slowly, this again, if you are a sincere seeker of truth, my book is sort of written in a way that disarms the reader in the beginning, because some people can get their backs up. Some people can experience what they call cognitive dissonance when presented with new information. And that can create a wall, and people get stuck there. And it's too bad, because I think there's so much more that we can learn from each other and from this earth without thinking or knowing that we know everything about it. And so really, my book, the name of it is True Earth Whisperer. And the true earth is ourselves, the true ground of being within ourselves. And whether you're a heliocentrist, or whether you're a geocentrist, or a simulation theorist, or concave, convex earther, whatever that may be, there's no reason to have this conflict anymore. Here's the solution. These toxic debates don't need to continue as they are. And we have in front of us a way forward that can build the bridges and bring us back together while seeking the truth and getting answers.
And you're touching on something there that I find really powerful to hold in mind as well, is that we can have these debates and there gets to a point where it almost doesn't even matter, because it doesn't change the fact we're here having an experience and having an experience shared with other people. So what is the best way to nurture those relationships for whatever the outcome, whatever we find is? And I find it really interesting that there has been a culture around books for so many decades, and in written words and then in stories spoken orally even before that, which bring people together in that frame of we're having an experience here. And I think that's why we're here talking about subversive books, because the books are an opportunity to create an atmosphere, create an environment that, especially in this day and age, has become subversive. It is subversive to have a holistic experience with another human being. From some objective level, it shouldn't be that case, but this is the circumstance that it is. And I find there's a really fun opportunity there to relearn how to do that in a really awesome way. And having a book like yours, which also is more non-fiction in nature and has structures to help people implement and, as I see it, generate from their own being, is absolutely vital in that.
Yeah. You said a key word there, or phrase a moment ago, nurture relationships. And really, that's what the dyad comes down to. We don't regularly get into conscious communicative structure with each other. We've lost that. And so many cycles of communication are unfinished. They just, we may say something to our partners or our family members, and it's left unfinished. The cycle never completed itself. And so within ourselves, we're holding that unfinished energy where we can go back and we can complete these cycles and feel complete, feel in alignment with each other. And so in a dyad, it doesn't just have to be tell me where you are. Traditionally, in the Zen Buddhist traditions, these instructions, which are known as koans. A koan is kind of a paradoxical question, an open-ended, tell me the sound of one hand clapping kind of thing. There's not meant to be a final answer or destination. It's an explorative journey that two people take together, and it could be tell me who you are, or tell me what another is, or tell me what love is. Whatever instruction you agree upon, that's the one that you choose for about, 40 minutes, and the two partners will just drill on that same question. And you know something? There is magic in shared experience like that. You can't really know what it is until you do it, and you can't be told. You must be shown and do it yourself. So I'm bringing that back. I think the dyad is a lost art of communication, and there's much to be gained and much consciousness to be delivered, and more awareness to have between each other. And it's just like, it just blows your heart wide open. It's an opening experience, not a closing one. And I think that's what we need to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. As a poet, that really synergizes with me. And I have a different lens and a different modality as to how I reach some of those moments. And because different people respond differently to different things. And having both books like yours, which has a more instructional, generative, inviting way of doing that, also, and then having the option to have something more abstract, more open, and have a dance between those, I think is what brings us closer to a sense of truth and a sense of harmony with people. I want to ask you a little more about the circumstances of which this book came together. My first instinct where I knew I wanted to write a book funnily enough, I was visiting some family members, and in their bathroom they had this really little poetry pamphlet just on the shelf in there, and I thought, oh, that's funny. They can read it while they're there on the bathroom doing their business, and there was a little chuckle within me. But then I stopped for a moment, and I thought, well, hang on, we've reached a circumstance in much of society where, for some people, that might be their only moment of silence that they get. That genuinely might be the only opportunity to, pick up something and slow down. And if there's, material there that is for me, that was in a shorter form that's accessible, then it's there for them. And in that moment, I was like, why don't I do a little book? Even if it's not in someone's bathroom, maybe it's on a coffee table, maybe it's somewhere else. And at a time when a lot of people were also telling me that the poems I was sharing online were really resonating with them and having a really powerful impact, I thought, well, let's give people something they can take in the physical so they can enjoy it in a space even more away from that noise. Was there a moment for you when you realized, oh, I've got to turn this into a book, all this knowledge and insight that I've got about Dyads that I know people can benefit from? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, good question, Tom. Like yourself, being a poet, you feel that you have a gift to give, and that needs to be duplicated, right? To many people, they need to reach you, and you need to reach them. And I think that's why anyone would write a book to begin with. We've got value. We've got something of value to give. And, there's some people out there that may think that, maybe you're misleading people with that information, or you're grifting, or something like that. But this is a capitalist society, and if you're adding value, then you're adding value, and that puts everybody on the same playing field. So like yourself, I feel like I had this years upon years of research and knowledge that I had been imparted, and I'd looked into myself. Just like if it was in paper form, it would be like stacked, piled high of years of just going down the rabbit hole on so many different topics, and then wanting to compile that and distill the message into a readable format that people could digest, right? So I'm really passionate about cosmology, and I came from all of the information and education and indoctrination that pretty much everybody was given. And yet, I think the main difference is some of us feel that along the line we were betrayed. Somebody or something lied to us, or we figured something out. And we said, that doesn't line up. And then you look further into it because I feel so strongly about living from truth versus living from a deception. Personally, and some people that I know, a lot of people I know, can't do that. They just cannot go through this life living from a lie. And so they will do anything possible to find out what is the real thing, what is the truth, and how can I'm just as passionate about wanting to wake other people up to that. I want them to see what I see, and vice versa. And so, there's, wanting to duplicate myself, wanting to share this knowledge, and provide solutions. I think that's just such a main part of it, is that, I could write a flat earth book that explores different sides of cosmologies, but really it's coming back to the true nature of our being and meeting each other in that place again, because it just ends up in toxic rhetoric, and at the end of the day, we've just high-fived our own egos, and what is to gain from that? The debate is at a standstill. Nothing has moved forward because the division is even more spread. The wedge between us is even more deeper. So that's how I really felt strongly about bringing Dyads, which I must give thanks to my teachers for teaching me the Dyad process. And all the years I studied how to do enlightened communication this way. between two people. So I'm like, how can I tie this in to the modern day cosmological debate? I just, everybody stays in their own lane, right? Yours is poetry. Somebody else is parenting, perhaps. Somebody else may do plumbing, like whatever it may be, whatever you want to write a book about. And, awakening, spiritual awakening. This is just the lane that I chose, just because it resonated most with me, and where I felt I could be the most useful, and really offer something of value to people that are true, sincere seekers of what is real. Because what we find at the end of this process can't be put into words, and that is real. That feels, the truth is a feeling. So I want to offer a way to get there.
Yeah, and it's funny that there is that dichotomy or the irony that we're trying to reach something that can't be achieved in words, and yet we're still using words to get there. And that's something that's becoming more and more into my focus as a poet is, what are my opportunities to create silence? How can I use words to create space in between the moments where there are more words, for things to settle, for things to integrate, for something new to arise there? And what I'm seeing here is there's a story. There's the story of, we think we have a certain conception of the world. We come across something that challenges that perception. We feel like we've been lied to or betrayed, that you were hinting at there. We have this instance of then collecting new information to say, hang on, this isn't right, going into that argumentative debate space to try and support everything we found so far, and yet struggling to reach other people. And what I see is then, this mirrors my own journey, where I found this in the medical system when I was studying dentistry, where I was collecting this holistic knowledge of how health could be, and yet coming completely at odds with everyone who just wasn't ready to accept that in a debate space. And that was really difficult for me. I had a very hard time mentally and emotionally trying to get through that, to say, well, here's all the knowledge, but no one's listening. What do I do? That's when the next part of the story came in for me. It's like, well, okay, there's something different I can do here to generate. And this formulates a big part of why I write books, why I write poetry, why I'm here talking about subversive books, is that it's one manifestation for me of how can we move away from talking about what we're against and start talking about what we're for. It's a huge shift, but it's a really powerful shift, because it can bring people together in a context where the truth naturally arises. It does. And what I'm hearing about the book and how you've put that together is, at least it sounds like to me, and you can add any more to this if you wish, that there's some synergy there for you in how you see it.
Yeah, absolutely. You said another key phrase there, where the truth arrives naturally and organically instead of through force. So my experiences doing Dyads it's pretty extensive. I mean, aside from my training, when I began doing them as a participant, we would do them weeks at a time at retreats. So not only are these meditation retreats, they're partnered Dyad retreats. And within that time, you have to hand over your cell phone, your keys, your contact with the outside world, and really cut off from what you know of as, just like the Matrix, and leave that behind, because you're about to go deep into an inquiry, an intentional inquiry with another. And then that would kind of rotate. Partners would rotate, so you would be sitting in front of somebody new each time. And so it would be fresh. And there would be this sort of fresh, present wakefulness always arising. And yet something is always dissolving at the same time. Something new coming in while the old is being let go of. And while we do these instructions, like tell me where you are, that again just starts to dissolve like an ice cube in warm water. Everything we think we know and hold as most sacred assumptions begins to melt away. And we were shown something new organically. And that kind of arriving is like, you can't like make it a destination. You can pinpoint it on your personal GPS system in your mind. You can make the intention that, all right, I'm going to have a direct experience of truth, of kensho. I'm gonna arrive there at some point, whether I do or not. I'm completely unattached to the outcome. That's the key, is to set the intention and just let it go. Because who knows what's gonna happen within the dyad? Who knows what may come up as the result of this inquiry together? But because we're doing it together, there's a synergy and there's a shared exploration. We're both in this together. We're both seeking the truth. And whatever and whoever we come out of at the end, we're going to be there for each other with arms wide open, So it's a very healing experience, and it's very organic, and it's our right. We can do this any time of the day with anybody, as long as we're open to it, right?
Yeah. It's you reminded me of a saying. I once met Olivia Newton-John's naturopath. Wonderful lady, has done lots of stuff now with energy medicine and helping to consult on new energy medicine devices. And I was in a class from her, and we were chatting, and we went on a complete tangent, had an amazing conversation about all things natural health. Was nothing to do with what we were meant to be. And she got to the end and she was like, I have this saying, and it was, that was the plan. And she said that's her favorite saying, but it links completely to that detachment of outcome. And in that phrase, there's like a humor of honoring that, oh yeah, we had this plan and we didn't work out. And yet there's still a respect and acknowledgement that actually it was the journey there that was the most important thing. And that's not only is there 4 words there that capture that, that's words in and of itself being powerful. Something else that you spoke to that I thought was really interesting is the idea of the retreats and having that moment to essentially create a story there. And there's also what I see as synergy with why people keep writing books, why people keep telling stories, is because there's always a need to do that. Because the individual circumstances and situations of this matrix, of this reality, however you want to call it or conceive it is, there's a need to redo that process and retell it. It's why people go on multiple retreats. Even though the same structures are there, some of the same exercises, depending on the circumstance, it can be healing in a wildly different way to a previous time. And what you were talking about with your experiences with the retreats as a way of informing quite literally some of that process is synergistic with why I see we're still writing books and telling stories of all different formats as a way of sharing in information and finding a greater sense of who we are, what we're meant to do. We're here having this experience. We might as well find something to gift to the world. Yeah.
This work is the work. This is something that we've kind of, in the last, couple of decades gone into the shadow side of ourselves and exploring that which is hidden. And so when we do the work, it's important that each of us, maybe do a little mind clearing along the way, clearing some old past traumas, working in a psycho-spiritual therapeutic way so that our relationships are more harmonious and we're not like caught up in our own, shit. So you mentioned something also that, the destination it isn't important. It's about the journey. And one of my teacher's favorite sayings is synchronicity is usual. And I think, whatever unfolds is what is meant to, and we take that, and that's the material that that's grist for the mill that we learn from, and we keep doing that. But these retreats they could appear as like, a therapist session or a madhouse. People are crying, people are screaming, they're standing up on chairs, but they're having this awakening, direct experience of Kensho. And we didn't know what this was. And suddenly we're not in our bodies. We suddenly take that 40,000 foot view, step back, and we are the witness to our lives. We become the witness, and now we're able to observe our beliefs. Now we can observe, why do I think this way, this sort of chronic way of being, and unlock whatever it is that needs to be let go of and just disposed of, and that's not serving me anymore, right? So Bruce Lee, he said, take what serves you and discard the rest. And so this is a big process, or an important process of doing that, of shedding away what no longer serves us.
And then we add in the next element to that, at least for me, is that writing has then been my integration of some of those processes. I've had my share of retreats, and I'm always finding myself writing poetry and stories and whatever after that as a way of working out, okay, I've had this moment, I've had this release, now what can I build out of this to move forward? I'm curious if you have any insight on if there's something you've learned about yourself specifically from writing this book and putting it together as a book that you wouldn't have necessarily seen otherwise. Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, good question. Just the very fact that you take on the task of doing research, compiling that research, and putting it and packaging it together, and just learning that whole self-publishing part of the game, right? Because a lot of us aren't in the positions of hiring publishers and editors and ghostwriters or illustrators, right? These days, all of the tools are there for us to do it ourselves. And we just have to learn how to play that game correctly. So that leap of believing in yourself, in myself, and just taking the action steps every single day, it was the commitment and it was the dedication. Any writer knows that this is gonna be a labor of love and a passion project. And if you want that out in the world and duplicate yourself through the book, through the written word, you're gonna have to commit. And so I don't have to tell that to writers. Everybody knows that being a writer takes this. So I would just say that if you're inspired to do so, just to really buckle down and do it and take those steps towards expressing yourself and typing a little each day, writing a little each day, and just getting it all out there, because we need it. We don't need any more book burnings that are gonna stifle this subversive information going forward. These are the books that we need right now, because there's subversive books, but there's a lot of books out there that are just very misleading as well. So we're not putting out misinformation, we're putting out missing information.
I like that a lot. And you spoke to the self-publishing element there as well, which in terms of the technology we've got now, there's perhaps been no greater time to be able to put together a book and send it all across the world using various technologies without the interruptions that may or may not have existed before. And what I'm finding is there's still incredibly high quality ways of producing amazing materials through that. And it shows that you don't need some big institutional publishing house that may or may not be trying to push various agendas in how it operates. As a independent self-published author, I can still hire editors and artists independently if I wanted to help me create the most powerful piece of work I can. And if anything, that way of working, that way of being is far more in line with certainly anarchist philosophy than working with the big publishing houses to try and put that information out there. And so this is part of what I see as for me, it mirrors a wider shift as well that's happening, that is away from these big centralized structures and into this decentralized, more sovereign way of being. And I think conferences like this are a great spark that helps set off some of those other pathways of how that happens into motion. And who knows if there's a book that someone here, someone listening is going to write as a result of some of the things they learn about the experience here. And I really look forward to hearing from people if that's the case, and seeing the fruits of all this labor going forward in whatever format it is. You know, even if it's not a written book, it could be films, it could be music, it can be physical art, whatever it is. We need all of these different modalities. There's a reason why we're making them. If there isn't a reason for us to be doing all these things, we wouldn't be up here talking about books. There wouldn't have been books that have come before us and that will come after us. So clearly it's a part of why we're here, to be involved in this creative process. And for me, it connects with Jungian philosophy of it is the work. Literally, and fun to use that phrase, literally. Literal refers to literary. There's an element to that which is exactly the same. This is the work that we do. Yeah.
We need to keep books too, because
keep books.
The digital is easily deleted. They won't be here in 100 years. It's all going to be gone in the news. So we need to keep paper books.
Yeah, that's the flip side to some of the amazing digital technology that I've been able to reach people and connect with people across the world that I would never have done otherwise, is that there's also different ways and different avenues that the information and the energy and intent that's being carried there can be distorted in ways that would have been very different in the past. This brings me to what I think would be quite an interesting question is, what have you found to be some of the most powerful ways to share your books and share your words with people?
Okay, good question. And that's definitely my priority. Beyond that is actually teaching and, well, at least coaching people along how to do this, how to write a book. You need front matter, you need the main chapter bodies, and you need back matter. And some people don't even think of that sort of stuff. But, if we could get like a wave of, let's just say, flat earthers to each write a book and overwhelm Amazon, well, suddenly all of these books, these ebooks, paperback and hardcover, suddenly they're all coming into the cosmological genre, right? The true earth genre. It's like, what is going on here? And just throw Amazon off kilter with flat earth authors. Each of us sharing our experience, our stories, why we came and how we came to, know what we know, and just share our experience through a book. That to me is power, and I think there will be a grand rising if that was to happen. So. Yeah. What was the first part of your question there again? I'm sorry.
It was just about how have you gone about sharing your books and your works with others? How do you approach that? I can speak a little bit to that process for me because, I found that, yes, I can have an online presence and have my books there available for anyone who, that's their only way to get it. What I find most impactful actually is being able to meet people in person, doing readings of the books in person. Poetry lends itself to that quite well. Connecting with people in that way and then being able to hand them a physical book in person to say, this is yours now. I think we're in a time where both approaches are equally valid for different reasons. And I'm sure some people may lean more towards one and some people more towards the other. And that's the that's the beauty of humanity, is that we do have different approaches. We do have different ways that work for us, and people we can connect with that someone else can connect with their poetry and their books in a way that I could never. So if you've got any more insight into how you go about sharing and some of those encounters where something you've shared from the book has been life-changing, I'd be really keen to hear it.
Yeah, sure. So there's this word that's become very popular in the last couple of years, and that is coherence. Has anybody picked up that word, coherence? So suddenly it's more and more in the field. And more specifically, heart coherence, right? And so that just describes a certain alignment, you know? So I just go out there and I talk about dyads. And I do dyads with people. The only way to know what it's gonna be like is to do one and experience it for themselves. And then I speak about the topic that the book is about and how you can bring it into a practice with just, you know, maybe you lost a good friend to the debate. Maybe a family member kind of stopped talking to you, and it's just like, you know, the black swan of the family or whatever, right? Or the sheep or whatever. And now here's a way to gently introduce and start building bridges again back to each other. So it's a very, I just can't emphasize enough, it's a very powerful process. People don't know what they don't know until they experience it. And then they realize, wow, I really needed that. All I really needed was someone to hear me and have it land and then be appreciated for that expression, right? Because again, we've expressed ourselves and those cycles are just hanging out in the ether unfinished. Cycles upon cycles of communication that pile up and just create this huge just mind frick that just builds and builds and builds. And then now we have relationship issues, right? Yeah, we all know how important communication is. And so that's the part that I'm choosing to emphasize in my book and the topic of cosmology, specifically, just because I know how toxic it is. So I really think there's something here for people, and it will take that one with that resonance, with that same heart coherence to pick up my book. Because if it doesn't resonate with you, well, you don't pick it up, and that's okay. I'm just still going out there and talking about it with people. I get on interviews, like, you know, I love doing this sort of thing, podcasts, and just meeting people where they're at.
Yeah, exactly. And it speaks to something there as well for me, is when I create poems, put them out there in whatever format, deliver them live, put the text online, is that I actually never know. I'm always surprised that people come up and it's like, oh, hang on, I know your poems. I've read them or heard them somewhere. Like, just the creation of the work and the act of delivering that to someone, even if they buy a book with the intent of reading it and they never did, there's something about, you never know, that book might be on the shelf and someone else might see it and pick it up. All these works that we do, these acts of creation, ripple and resonate far beyond what I'm ever going to conceive in this lifetime. And that's the beauty of creative work like this, and especially in creative books, something that can be handed down, I think, from generations to generations. I find nothing more wonderful than finding old books. I've been in so many, you know, antique and secondhand shops, and I remember I bought a little poetry book with gold gilding from like the mid 1800s, which was like a few pounds or something. It was dusty in a corner, and it was, you know, it was lovely, and it was inspiring to me to have that.
Yeah. I read a lot of occult books as well, and this is what you're saying. All these books I read are from the 1800s. 100 years from now, your book's going to be in some used secondhand bookstore dust, right? And some little geek's going to, because they'll suppress all this shit if they get their way, right? And some geek's going to come in there, pick it up, and tell all his friends, and suddenly the next thing you know, you're the next Madame Blavatsky or whatever, like they're like, what, did you know what they were talking about back in 2020? So yeah, that's the other thing, the internet, it's important, the paper books for sure, and it's spelling, there is much more magical energy intent when you write a book than when it's digitally typed in. Your hand to paper is magical and not so much hands to keyboard to digital, zeros and ones, yeah.
100%. And I think this brings us to a really nice way to close because, hey, if you've somehow found a way to listen to this 100 years or so in the future and you found us in a secondhand bin, good on you. But if you're here in the now and here in the present, Sonny, what's the best way for people to find your book and to find your work?
Well, thank you for this opportunity. It was very spontaneous, and I'm a spontaneous kind of guy. So to you and Steve, thank you so much. My book is available in all formats, and at the moment, I'm just playing the Amazon game, but I will be expanding. So the name of it is True Earth Whisperer by Sonny Davis. And the tagline is, "The Lost Art of Dyads in a World That Debates Everything and Understands Nothing." Thanks, everybody.
Excellent stuff, Sonny. Thank you. And some of you might have heard my talk yesterday. I mentioned the books there. If you need a reminder or if you're just tuning in now, I've got my books over at tom-shaw.uk. There's digital, there's physical. You can have a little book.
Give us your top names, your top books.
Yeah, so Go Forth Butterfly is the latest one. I've done a couple of other ones before that. You can find all those on the website. You can find them on a couple of websites as well, but come to me direct because Amazon aren't taking my money that way, which is always very nice.
What do you guys think real quick about, I'm a children's book author as well. People are like, Amazon is the devil, though you're dealing with the devil. But the thing is, they can print and publish, and you just can't upfront that. They are giving you the comfort of not having to have all this upfront capital to get your work out there. But what are your thoughts? Would you like to get off Amazon eventually, or?
I mean, I don't use Amazon directly.
Yeah.
I use other services. Right now I'm using Lulu, but there's other ones available, and they allow for ways outside of Amazon for books to be shared as well. So,
right.
Yeah. And for me, it's just, this is the best tool I have in the moment to share that. And it works for me. And when it doesn't work for me, let's find another way to do it.
That's right. All right, beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time now, so please give a hand for Tom Shaw and Sonny Davis, man. Get the books.
Thanks, everybody.